Jesus puts the responsibility and accountability of serving on his disciples. Notice here, the disciples bring a problem to Jesus. But Jesus says, you solve the problem. The disciples see an issue, but Jesus has them fix it. There's tension in this text. The Bible ain't always pretty. There's some tension in this text. A miracle needs to happen. And Jesus says, you handle it. There's a problem that presented to Jesus, and Jesus says, you got it. Hold up, wait a minute, Jesus. What'd you just tell me? Hold on, Jesus, are you serious? Because when it came to the woman with the issue of blood, you didn't tell us to take off your garment and give it to her. She touched you and got healed. When it came to the dead boy who was in the casket, you touched the casket, he got up. When it came to the blind man, you spat on the ground. You took the dirt from the ground, made it muddy. You put dirt on his eyes, and he began to see. But now you telling us to go feed these at least 5,000 folk. This don't make sense. The math ain't mathing. This is too much for me to do, Jesus. But this text shows us that the problem we see in our lives, our ministry, our communities, and our families can be solved when we present them to God, while being submitted to God enough to obey the word he gives us to solve them. In other words, the miracle that we want to see in our lives depends on us being available enough to be active participants in the work. I see y'all don't like that. Y'all don't like that. Y'all don't like that. Y'all don't like that. Okay, y'all don't believe me? Okay. All a miracle is when divinity partners with humanity to do the extraordinary. That's all a miracle is. All a miracle is when divinity partners with humanity to do the extraordinary. And when your ordinary meets God's extra to do something that's beyond comprehension, that's when a miracle occurs. I see some of y'all still don't believe me, so I got some witnesses. Come here, Israel. You stuck at the Red Sea. Moses, you raised your staff, and God will send an east wind to split the Red Sea in half to be crossed across on dry ground. Y'all still don't believe me? David, you get 5 smooth stones and only use one and hurl it at the giant, and God will be with you to knock that giant out, and you go take that giant sword and you cut off that giant's head. Y'all still don't believe me? Come here, Abraham. You take your old, wrinkled up, impotent body and you lay with your old, beyond childbearing years wife Sarah, and God will make you the father of many nations. Y'all still don't believe me? Come here, Jesus. You die a horrible death. You stay in the grave on Friday, stay there all day Saturday, but early on the third day morning, God's going to raise you up. All I'm here to tell you is that when you do your part, God will do his. And all you have to do is submit to what he tells you to do. You want better relationships with your family? Stop playing the victim and stop being manipulative. You complaining about high blood pressure? Don't go downtown to the Rib Fest. You talk about you always broke? Tithe and budget. And the major lesson here is that the blessing happens when folk are obedient. I'm sorry, I don't mean to hurt nobody's feelings, but the old adage that when praises go up, blessings come down, that's a lie. The blessings come down as your obedience goes up. Your praise is not predicate. Your praise is not tied to a blessing. Your blessing is tied to your obedience. Trust me, I know. And notice this. The disciples didn't argue. They didn't fight back. They didn't negotiate. They didn't tell Jesus, that's not my ministry. I'm not gifted for that, Jesus. I don't have the capacity for that, Jesus. Thomas didn't talk to Bartholomew and get Nathaniel. And he says, hey, man, Jesus is tripping, but I need you to go feed these people. But what did they do? They did what Jesus told them to do. And the people were blessed. I said the people were blessed. Y'all didn't get it. I said the people were blessed. What the Lord tells you to do affects how others are blessed. And I'm tired of church folk sitting on their gifts and always looking for someone else to do what it is that God called them to do. God gifted and called you to sing. God called you to preach. God told you to minister to those kids. God told you to clean. God told you to look out. But you'd rather say no and see folk blessed and not see folk blessed because you too lazy to work. But when God and when leadership gives you directions, it's because there is something inside of you that only you can do. That will bless others. Stop sitting around looking for the right opportunity to do what it is that you feel is right and comfortable, and just do what God told you to do. I'm done after this. But my last point, I got to say this. So faith demands you push through hard times. Faith demands you be submitted. But lastly, faith demands that you trust in God. I wish I had something a little bit more deep than that, but that's all I got. Verse 17, it says, they said to him, we have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish. He, being Jesus, said, bring them here to me. Can I cross over real fast? In John's gospel, this event is told as well, and we see that in this account, that one of the disciples named Philip tells Jesus that even if they worked for half a year to buy all of the food that they needed to eat, it still wouldn't be enough for everyone. One translation says that each person will only get a bite to eat. Then Andrew, Peter's brother, comes up to him and says, hey, there's a boy over there. He has 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how would that feed all the people? Y'all hang with me now. Here, we have on one hand, one person who looks at this situation as unfixable. Philip, thinking logically, sees the crowd. He does the math, Rachel, and he says, Jesus, this ain't going to work. Even if we worked hard enough and long enough, it still wouldn't be enough. Then on the other hand, Andrew peeps the scene out. He looks hard and long enough, and he looks at this boy. He sees 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. He looks at the boy, looks at his food, then looks at Jesus. He looks at the boy, looks at his food, and then looks at Jesus. On one hand, we have one who sees an unfixable situation. But on the other hand, we see somebody else who sees a situation full of possibilities. And Philip says, all right, bro, let's just go see what Jesus has to say. Family, in this interaction, we see what faith is all about. On one hand, we have someone who is trying to make something work based off their own work. And on the other hand, we see somebody who is trying to make something happen based off Jesus' ability. On one hand, we have somebody thinking logically and tries to figure out how their own work and merit can make it happen. But on the other hand, we have somebody who says it seems like it's not enough, but if I give it to Jesus, all I can do is say, let's see what Jesus got to say about this. Family, not only is this a visual depiction of faith, but it is a perfect example of grace. Grace simply isn't just God's unmerited favor. But grace is when a superior one, more powerful one, stoops down and helps the lesser and weaker one. In other words, it's when God sees you're lacking in an area and you come to God for help. And God comes down to your level and evens the playing field. Work says it's all on me, but grace says I'll leave it up to God. Works has you trying to figure out a way to make things right, but grace says I can't make it right, but if I give it to God, he'll make it all right. And family, that's the gospel story right there. When God saw our sin-sick condition, he said, I need to come to where they are. And if they come to me, I'll even the playing field. Paul said, for by grace you have been saved through faith, not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not as a result of works, so that no one can boast. You can buy your way into grace. You can negotiate your way into grace. You can sell your way into grace. You can sex your way into grace. You can smoke your way into grace. You can drink your way into grace. It was only by the grace of God that you was able to be afforded what it is that you have. Somebody needs to thank God for grace. All right, I'm done. But when I look at this text, I see something that gets lost in the reading. Jesus takes 5 loaves, 2 fish, blesses the food, breaks the bread, and he gave them to the disciples to give to the crowd. The Bible says that the crowd ate until they were satisfied or full. In other words, they might have had seconds, they might have had thirds, they might have had fourths, fifths, sixths, sevenths, eighths, I don't know. But the Bible says they kept eating until they were full or satisfied. Y'all missing this, y'all missing this. The crowd ate until they couldn't eat no more. Then after the crowd ate, the disciples picked up what was left over of the broken pieces and filled up 12 baskets. Jesus takes the food, he blesses it, he breaks it, gives it to the disciples. The disciples give it to the crowd, and the crowd now eats. And then the disciples take the leftovers and fill 12 baskets. I can be a little slow sometimes. How many disciples are there? Somebody help me out. 12 disciples. Is that a coincidence? Y'all talk back to this black preacher. Is that a coincidence? Family, this right here shows what happens when you serve the people. That when you are obedient to the call of God that is on your life and push through hard times, you submit to him and you trust him and you do your best in serving, that God has a way of looking out for you. Y'all didn't like that. Y'all didn't like that. When you do what it is that you can do with what it is that you have, and you do it in excellence as to glorify God, God has a way of looking out for you. So GLC, keep on serving. Keep on teaching. Keep on preaching. Keep loving on people when they seem unlovable. Keep on praying for people. Keep showing up in the community, even if the community doesn't show up for you. GLC, keep serving and working while still dealing with your own disappointment, your own doubts, your own fears, and still working through your own individual traumas and your own individual grief and your own individual heartbreak. Keep on doing it, because after a while, it'll all pay off. Okay, I'm really done. But you know what really blessed me about this? It's the whole sequence of all this, how it all went down, right? The disciples fed them, got the leftovers, and filled the baskets with the fragments or the broken pieces. The text says they fed at least 5,000 people, because for some reason they ain't counting women and children, right? So they fed at least 5,000 folk. But somehow Jesus allowed the disciples to fill 12 baskets with broken pieces. The disciples served, but they had baskets full of broken pieces. The disciples served, but they were full of brokenness. Can I take this eisegetical leap here? All that means is I'm just going to use my sanctified imagination. But can I say this? Can I suggest this? That these 12 baskets just didn't symbolize or just weren't for the disciples, but rather they symbolized the disciples. That God knows your imperfections. God knows your dirt. God knows your mess. God knows your brokenness. But somehow in God's love, his mercy, and his grace, he still says, I'm still going to use you. That God knows all the stuff you did. He knows exactly what you did last summer. Who you did it with, what time you did it, how you smelled afterwards. But he says, I'm still going to use you. Woo! That God is so loving That he's no respecter of person. That when he sees you at your lowest, God says, let me take you to your highest. And let me park here real quick. If you look at the Greek word for basket, it's this word kophinos, which literally simply means a vessel. You're a vessel with some brokenness in you. You're filled to be used for God's glory, but you still got issues. And that's not what shouted me. I'm sorry, that's not what shouted me. I looked at Jesus, and I looked at what he had. 5 loaves, 2 fish. I told you I could be slow sometimes. So it's 5 plus 2. Thank you, son. 5 plus 2 is 7. I know we got some folk who know the word here. Y'all know what the number 7 symbolizes? Perfection, completion, wholeness. What Jesus is simply saying, that he has a way of making whole out of stuff that looks broken. That somehow Jesus, that's the restorative power of Jesus. That when people will look at you and cast you off and throw you away, they said, it can't no good come out of this, ain't nothing beautiful about this. Jesus would come along and says, I can see something I can work with. I see some wholeness in this. I see some perfection in this. I see some completion in this. All right, I'm really done after this. Let me tell you this story and I'm out. I remember one night, I was downstairs in the kitchen. I was cleaning up, and as I'm zoned out cleaning up, I hear my daughter Naomi crying as loud as she can. So I race upstairs to see what's going on. I go to her room, and she has in her hand pieces of one of her favorite toys. They're broken, and she's holding them in her hand. She's crying unconsolably. And then my son Seth, being the prophet that he is, he walks into the room, looks at Naomi's hands, looks at Naomi, puts his hand on her shoulder, and says, don't worry, Naomi, because if we put it in the recycle bin, it'll go to the recycling factory, and they know exactly what to do with it, and somebody can use it again. I'm out, y'all. Seth said, if we put this in the recycling bin, on trash day when we set it out, it's going to go to the recycling factory. And when they sort through all the broken pieces, somebody knows exactly what to do with it so somebody can use it all over again. I'm here to tell you, family, that you may have some brokenness in your life. You may have some situations that seem unfixable. You may have some stuff that looks like trash, but God says that's some good treasure right there. If you just hand it over to Jesus, he knows exactly what to do with it. I heard somebody say that when I turned it over to Jesus, he knew just what to do about it. I stopped worrying about it. I stopped crying about it. But when I handed it over to Jesus, he knew exactly what to do with it. Can I tell you one more story? There was another person in the Bible. His name is Jesus. One Friday, they took him up on Calvary's Hill. They put a crown of thorns on his head. They put a spear in his side. They nailed his right hand, nailed his left hand, riveted his feet. He gave up the ghost. He had broken pieces in his body. They laid him in the tomb. He was there all Friday night, all Saturday morning, all day Saturday, all night Saturday night. And when he was laying in that grave, the Bible says that he got up at a certain time. I don't know if it was 6 o'clock. I don't know if it was 7 o'clock. So I'll just say early. Early, he got up with all power. Not just pieces of power. Not just fragments of power. Not just a little bit of power. But he got up